The battered pickup truck groaned along the winding mountain road, kicking up dust clouds that glowed amber in the setting sun. Mia clutched the steering wheel with white knuckles, her dark hair falling across tired eyes. Beside her, a large German shepherd lay across the passenger seat, his wounded leg carefully wrapped in what had once been her favorite t-shirt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Almost there, Ranger, she whispered, more to herself than to the dog. We'll find somewhere safe tonight. The faded sign appeared ahead. Welcome to Pine Ridge, Colorado. Population 827. Mia exhaled slowly, fighting the trembling in her hands. 300 miles from everything she'd left behind, but still not far enough to quiet the fear that gnawed at her edges. The dog whimpered softly, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face. I know, boy. I'm scared too. She reached over to stroke his head, careful to avoid the bandages. But we're together, that's what matters. The town of Pine Ridge unfolded before her, a main street lined with weathered storefronts, their windows warm with evening light. A few locals strolled the sidewalks, glancing curiously at her truck as it rumbled past. Mia kept driving, following the directions scribbled on the gas station napkin. 3 miles past town, right at the split oak, then follow the dirt road until you see the fence. The woman at the diner had been kind but vague. Old Mason Place, she'd said, wiping her hands on her apron. Owners looking for seasonal help. Might not be much, but it's something. The oak appeared like a sentinel, its massive trunk split down the middle decades ago by lightning, yet still thriving. Mia turned right, the truck's suspension protesting against the rutted dirt road. In the distance, mountains rose like slumbering giants against the darkening sky. The fence emerged gradually, a stretch of weathered wood posts connected by wire, running alongside the road. Beyond it, open pasture rolled toward distant pine forests. Ranger stirred beside her, nose twitching at new scents through the half-open window. Easy, boy, Mia murmured. We're not sure of our welcome yet. The gate appeared around the next bend. A simple wooden arch with a small metal sign. Clearwater Ranch. Mia slowed, her heart hammering against her ribs. What if this was a mistake? What if there was no job? What if... A rider appeared on the ridge above the gate, silhouetted against the sunset. Horse and human paused, watching her approach. Mia swallowed hard and pulled to a stop before the gate. No turning back now, she told Ranger, who was now alert, ears forward despite his pain. Let's hope your charm works better than mine. She stepped out of the truck, knees stiff from hours of driving. The rider approached slowly, guiding his horse down the gentle slope toward the gate. As he drew closer, Mia could make out his features. A man perhaps in his late 30s, tall in the saddle, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of stubble. He wore a battered cowboy hat pulled low, but she could feel his eyes assessing her, taking in the faded truck, her city clothes, and the dog watching warily from the passenger seat. You lost? His voice was deep, roughened by wind and quiet. Mia straightened her shoulders. Are you Ethan Mason? The man shifted in his saddle. Depends who's asking. I'm Mia Collins. Nancy at the diner in town said you might have work available. Seasonal help. His expression didn't change. Nancy talks too much. Mia felt her heart sink. So there's no work? The man, Mason, she presumed, dismounted in one fluid motion. His horse, a handsome chestnut quarter horse, stood patiently behind him as he approached the gate. Didn't say that. He paused, gaze moving to the truck. What's with the dog? As if on cue, Ranger gave a soft whine. Mia tensed. He's mine. He's hurt, but he's recovering. He won't be any trouble. Mason's eyes narrowed slightly. Ranch dogs work for their keep. He will, Mia said quickly, once his leg heals. He's smart, learns fast. Mason studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pushed his hat back slightly, revealing eyes the color of weathered denim. Season starts in 2 days. Cattle drive prep, then summer tourists. Cabins open. It's not much, but it's got a roof. Relief washed through her so strongly that Mia had to lock her knees to stay upright. "Thank you, I appreciate the opportunity." He nodded once, then moved to unlatch the gate. As he swung it open, he added, "Pays fair, but I expect everyone to pull their weight, including him." He nodded toward Ranger. "He will," Mia promised again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mason stepped back, allowing her to drive through. "Follow the road up to the main house. Cabin's just beyond, near the small barn." As she pulled forward, he added, "One condition." Mia stopped, her hands tightening on the wheel. "Here it comes," she thought. "The catch." "That dog," Mason said, his face stern in her rearview mirror. "He guards the barn at night once he's healed. We've had coyotes getting bold lately." She blinked, surprised. "That's it?" The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. "For now. Stay if he guards the barn." The words hung in the air between them, simple yet weighted with meaning she couldn't quite decipher. "He will," she said for the 3rd time, feeling like it was becoming a mantra. Mason nodded once more, then turned back to his horse. Mia continued up the road, her hands still trembling, but now with relief rather than fear. The road curved gently upward, revealing a sprawling ranch that took her breath away. A 2-story farmhouse stood proudly against the backdrop of mountains, its white paint gleaming in the last rays of sunlight. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, a massive barn, equipment sheds, and what appeared to be bunkhouses. Corrals and paddocks spread outward, some containing horses that raised their heads to watch her pass. To the east of the main house, a smaller building stood slightly apart, a cabin with a covered porch and simple furnishings visible through uncurtained windows. Beyond it, nestled against the tree line, was a smaller barn, weathered but sturdy. Mia parked near the cabin, turning to Ranger. "Well, boy, looks like we found shelter for tonight at least." She helped him carefully out of the truck, wincing at his pained movements. The veterinarian in the last town had assured her the leg wasn't broken, just badly cut and bruised. "Keep it clean, keep him quiet, and he'll heal," she'd been told. Easier said than done when you're running. As Ranger gingerly explored the area around the cabin, a woman emerged from the main house. Middle-aged, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a practical bun, she approached with purposeful strides. "You must be the help Nancy sent over," she called, her voice warm but appraising. "I'm Martha, cook and housekeeper for Mr. Mason." "Mia Collins." Mia offered her hand, which Martha shook firmly. "And this is Ranger." Martha glanced at the bandaged dog with experienced eyes. "Nasty wound. Coyote?" Mia hesitated. "Something like that." If Martha noticed her evasion, she didn't comment. "Cabin's basic but clean. Pump outside works for water. Bathroom's rustic but functional." She handed Mia a key. "Meals are at the main house. 6, noon, and 6 again. Don't be late or you'll miss out. Ethan doesn't wait for stragglers." "Thank you," Mia said, taking the key. "I appreciate this chance." Martha's eyes softened slightly. "Everyone deserves a chance, honey. Just don't squander it. Ethan doesn't give second ones." With that cryptic warning, Martha turned back toward the main house, calling over her shoulder, "Get settled. Dinner's in an hour." Inside, the cabin was indeed basic. One main room with a small kitchenette, a bedroom barely large enough for a double bed, and a tiny bathroom with a shower that would require careful maneuvering. But it was clean, with simple furnishings that spoke of practical comfort rather than style. Mia helped Ranger settle on a braided rug near the small fireplace, then quickly unpacked her meager belongings. 2 changes of clothes, a few toiletries, and a small photo in a battered frame that she placed face down in a drawer. By the time she'd freshened up and changed into her least-worn jeans and flannel shirt, the dinner bell was ringing from the main house. She knelt beside Ranger, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep. "Rest, boy. I'll bring you something back." The main house was warm and fragrant with the smells of home cooking. Martha directed her to the large kitchen, where a rustic table was set for 4. 2 ranch hands were already seated. An older man with leathery skin and kind eyes who introduced himself as Frank, and a younger woman with a no-nonsense ponytail and calloused hands named Jessie. "So you're the new girl," Jessie said, sizing her up. "Ever worked a ranch before?" Before Mia could answer, Ethan Mason entered, freshly showered but still radiating the same quiet intensity she'd sensed at the gate. "Leave the interrogation until after she's eaten, Jessie," he said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Nancy vouched for her. Jessie looked skeptical but nodded, passing Mia a basket of homemade rolls. "Nancy vouches for everyone. Remember that poet she sent up last spring?" Frank chuckled. "Boy couldn't tell a horse from a cow, but he wrote a mighty fine verse about mucking stalls." The conversation flowed around Mia as she ate, grateful for Martha's hearty beef stew and fresh bread. She learned that Clearwater Ranch ran cattle, but had diversified in recent years to include guided trail rides and, quote, city slicker experiences for tourists looking to play cowboy for a week. "That's where you'll start," Ethan told her, his first direct word since sitting down. "Helping Jessie with the trail rides. You can ride?" Mia nodded. "Yes." "It's been a while, but yes." He seemed satisfied with this. "Frank will test you tomorrow. If you pass, you start with the first group on Monday." "And if I don't?" Mia asked before she could stop herself. His eyes met hers across the table, unreadable. "Then you help Martha until you learn." The meal continued, with talk of cattle prices, fence repairs, and which horses were ready for the season. Mia listened, committing names and details to memory, all too aware of Ethan's occasional glances in her direction. As dinner concluded, Martha packed a small container. "For your dog," she explained, passing it to Mia. "Can't have him starving on his first night." "Thank you," Mia said, touched by the unexpected kindness. Outside, the night had fully descended, stars emerging in breathtaking clarity above the mountains. Mia paused on the porch, inhaling the scent of pine and open space, so different from city air. "Your dog," Ethan's voice behind her nearly made her jump. "What happened to him?" Mia turned to find him leaning against the porch post, face half-shadowed. "He was protecting me," she said simply. Ethan studied her for a long moment. "From what?" The question hung between them, laden with implications. Mia clutched the container of food tighter. "Does it matter?" "On my ranch? Yes." She met his gaze steadily. "He got between me and something that wanted to hurt me. That's all you need to know for now." To her surprise, he nodded, accepting this non-answer. "Fair enough. But Mia?" "Yes?" "Trouble has a way of finding those who run from it." He straightened, adjusting his hat. "Good night. 6 a.m. sharp tomorrow." Mia watched him walk toward the barn, his silhouette strong against the starlit yard. Only when he disappeared inside did she realize she'd been holding her breath. Back at the cabin, Ranger greeted her with a gentle nudge of his nose. She fed him Martha's offering, then sat beside him on the rug, his head heavy in her lap. "What do you think, boy? Can we stay here a while?" Ranger's eyes, wise beyond measure, gazed up at her with quiet trust. Outside, the wind whispered through pine trees, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. For the first time in weeks, Mia allowed herself to hope. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through uncurtained windows and the distant sounds of a ranch coming alive. Mia woke disoriented, then remembered Clearwater Ranch, the job, Ethan Mason's penetrating gaze. She dressed quickly in her best jeans and the flannel shirt she had worn last night, wishing she had proper boots instead of her worn sneakers. Ranger was already awake, his tail thumping weakly against the floor in greeting. "Looking better already," she told him, carefully checking his bandages. The wound was clean, no signs of infection. "Must be the mountain air." The cabin door swung open suddenly, making them both start. Jesse stood in the doorway, eyebrows raised. "You're late. It's 10 after 6. Mia scrambled to her feet. "I'm sorry, I didn't." "Save it," Jesse cut her off. "Frank's waiting at the corral." "I'd run if I were you." Her gaze dropped to Ranger. "Huh. Big fella, isn't he? German Shepherd mixed with what?" "Timberwolf," the shelter thought, Mia said, grabbing her jacket. "Will he be okay here alone?" Jesse shrugged. "Leave the door cracked. He looks like he needs rest more than company." She turned to go, then added, "Mason doesn't tolerate lateness. Consider this your only warning." Mia made sure Ranger had water within reach, then hurried after Jesse, who was already striding toward the main corrals. The ranch was fully awake now, with ranch hands moving purposefully between buildings, the smell of coffee and bacon lingering in the crisp morning air. Frank waited by the corral fence, a gentle-looking bay mare already saddled beside him. His weathered face creased into a smile. "Morning, city girl. Hope you slept well, because we're about to see what you're made of." For the next hour, Frank put her through her paces. Walking, trotting, cantering, basic commands and signals. The mare, aptly named Patience, responded willingly to Mia's somewhat rusty instructions. "Not bad," Frank allowed finally, as she brought Patience to a controlled stop beside him. "Been a while, but you've got good instincts. We can work with that." Relief flooded through Mia. "So I pass?" Frank chuckled. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. That was just the warm-up. Now we see how you handle a real trail horse." He whistled sharply, and a ranch hand led over a spirited-looking chestnut gelding with a white star on his forehead. Unlike Patience's calm demeanor, this horse pranced sideways, eyes alert and somewhat suspicious. "This is Rusty," Frank said, taking the reins. "He's what we call a character. Good trail horse, but he'll test you every inch of the way." Mia approached carefully, allowing Rusty to catch her scent before gently stroking his neck. The horse eyed her warily, but stood still for the examination. "He doesn't suffer fools," Frank continued, watching their interaction closely. "Tourists don't ride him. He's for experienced hands only." The implication was clear. This was the real test. Mia took a deep breath and nodded. "May I?" she asked, indicating the saddle. Frank handed her the reins with a nod. Mia moved smoothly, mounting in one fluid motion that belied her earlier awkwardness. Rusty immediately sidestepped, testing her balance, but she moved with him, her posture relaxed but firm. "Easy, boy," she murmured. "Let's understand each other." From the corner of her eye, she noticed Ethan Mason watching from the fence, his expression unreadable. Something in her straightened, determined to prove herself worthy of the chance he'd given her. For the next 30 minutes, she and Rusty engaged in a subtle battle of wills, him testing, her responding with calm confidence. By the time Frank called a halt, a fragile trust had formed between woman and horse. "Well now," Frank said, his tone suggesting he was impressed despite himself. "Seems like you two came to an understanding." Mia dismounted, patting Rusty's neck appreciatively. "He's smart. Just wanted to know I wouldn't panic." Frank nodded approvingly. "Most folks don't figure that out so quick." He took Rusty's reins. "You'll do, Mia Collins. Report to Jesse after breakfast for your trail assignments." As Frank led Rusty away, Mia became aware of Ethan approaching. He'd been watching the entire exchange, she realized, evaluating her without a word. "Rusty doesn't take to many people," he said by way of greeting. Mia brushed dust from her jeans. "Neither do I, generally speaking." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Breakfast's getting cold." They walked together toward the main house, a companionable silence between them that surprised Mia with its comfort. "Your dog," Ethan said suddenly. "How's he doing this morning?" The genuine concern in his voice caught her off guard. "Better, I think. The wound looks clean." Ethan nodded. "Martha's got some salve that might help. Used it on horses, but it works for all kinds." "Thank you," Mia said, meaning it. "That's very kind." He looked almost embarrassed by her gratitude. "Ranch takes care of its own," he said gruffly. "Even the four-legged ones." At the house, Martha had laid out a hearty breakfast. Eggs, bacon, homemade biscuits, and strong coffee. Jesse was already there, making notes in a battered ledger. "She'll do," Frank announced, helping himself to biscuits. "Got a good seat and doesn't spook easy." Jesse looked up, appraising Mia with new respect. "Rusty didn't dump you in the dirt? Impressive." "Don't sound so disappointed," Frank chuckled. "Not disappointed," Jesse corrected. "Just surprised. Most city folks don't last 5 minutes with that devil." "I grew up around horses," Mia offered, accepting the plate Martha passed her. "My grandfather had a small farm in Kentucky." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Those summers at her grandfather's had been the happiest of her childhood. Before everything changed, before she learned that safety was an illusion easily shattered. "Kentucky girl," Jesse mused. "That explains it." "Well, eat up. We've got trails to mark and horses to prepare before the first batch of tourists arrives on Monday." Breakfast passed quickly, with Martha packing a small container of food for Ranger and adding a jar of pungent-smelling salve with instructions for application. Mia thanked her profusely, touched again by the unexpected kindness. "Check on your dog, then meet me at the trail barn," Jesse instructed as they finished. "We've got a lot to cover if you're going to be ready by Monday." Back at the cabin, Mia found Ranger sitting on the porch, his ears perked and alert. The improvement in just one night was remarkable. His eyes brighter, his posture more relaxed, despite the bandaged leg. "Making yourself at home already?" she asked, kneeling to examine his wound. She applied Martha's salve carefully, amazed at how Ranger held perfectly still despite the obvious discomfort. "You're the bravest boy," she murmured, stroking his thick fur. "Always have been." As if understanding the compliment, Ranger licked her hand once, then turned his attention to the food she'd brought. While he ate, Mia quickly changed into the clothes Martha had left on her porch. Proper riding clothes borrowed from Jesse, she presumed, along with a pair of well-worn but serviceable boots. "I'll be back to check on you at lunch," she promised Ranger. "Rest and heal up, guardian of the barn." The morning passed in a flurry of activity as Jesse introduced her to the trail operation. Mapping routes, assigning horses to riders based on experience levels, safety protocols, and the fine art of managing tourists who thought watching westerns qualified them as cowboys. "Most important rule," Jesse said firmly, "is that guests always think they're having an adventure, but we always know exactly what's happening." Control disguised as freedom. By lunchtime, Mia's head was spinning with information, but she felt a growing confidence. This was work she could do, in a place where perhaps she and Ranger could find peace, at least for a while. As promised, she checked on Ranger at noon, relieved to find him resting comfortably in the shade of the porch. Martha had apparently visited while she was gone, leaving fresh water and what looked suspiciously like leftover steak in his bowl. "Making friends already?" Mia asked, sitting beside him for a few precious minutes. "That's more than I've managed." But even as she said it, she realized it wasn't entirely true. Frank's gruff approval, Martha's quiet kindness, even Jesse's grudging respect. They were opening doors, however cautiously. And Ethan Mason, with his penetrating gaze and unexpected concern for Ranger, she pushed the thought away. Getting attached was dangerous. This was temporary, just until she figured out her next move. Just until she was certain they'd stopped looking for her. The afternoon brought a comprehensive tour of the trails led by Jesse, who proved to be a demanding but fair teacher. They rode for hours, with Jesse pointing out landmarks, potential hazards, and the best spots for breaks. Rusty, assigned to Mia after her morning performance, behaved impeccably, seeming to understand the seriousness of their task. "He likes you," Jesse commented as they headed back toward the ranch, the sun beginning its descent behind the mountains. "That doesn't happen often." Mia patted Rusty's neck affectionately. "We understand each other." Jesse studied her for a moment. "You know, when Nancy called saying she'd found someone for the season, Ethan nearly hung up on her. After that poet disaster last year, he swore no more strays." Mia kept her expression neutral. "What changed his mind?" Jesse shrugged. "Don't know, but when he rode in last night and said to prepare the cabin, something was different. Like he'd made up his mind about something important." The words settled uncomfortably in Mia's chest. What had Ethan seen in her that made him offer shelter when he'd apparently sworn against it? And more importantly, what else did those perceptive eyes see that she wished to keep hidden? As they crested the final ridge, Clearwater Ranch spread below them in the golden evening light. Peaceful, orderly, beautiful in its rugged simplicity. For a brief moment, Mia allowed herself to imagine belonging here, making this remote mountain paradise a home. Pretty, isn't it? Jessie's voice interrupted her thoughts. Worth protecting. There was a weight to her words that Mia couldn't quite interpret, but before she could ask, Jessie urged her horse forward, heading down toward the stables. That evening at dinner, the conversation flowed more easily. Frank regaled them with tales of past cattle drives, while Jessie outlined the schedule for the coming week. Martha's cooking was, again, simple but delicious. Roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh vegetables from the greenhouse behind the main house. Ethan was quieter, contributing occasionally but mostly observing. Several times, Mia caught him watching her, his expression thoughtful rather than suspicious. It made her nervous, this careful attention, but also stirred something she hadn't felt in a long time. A warmth that had nothing to do with the hearty food or the fire crackling in the stone fireplace. After dinner, Mia helped Martha clear the table, insisting despite the older woman's protests. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, Martha spoke softly. "That dog of yours is coming along nicely. Strong spirit." Mia smiled. "Thank you for looking in on him. And for the salve. It's helped a lot." Martha nodded, drying a plate with methodical movements. "Animals know things we don't. They sense character." She paused, glancing toward the dining room where the others were still talking. "Ethan's the same way. Reads people better than most." Mia's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What do you mean?" Martha's eyes, kind but shrewd, studied her. "Just that he doesn't often make snap decisions about people. When he does, he's usually right." Before Mia could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway. "Frank and Jessie are heading out to check the north fence line. Thought you might want to see how Ranger's doing with the salve." The concern seemed genuine, catching Mia off guard again. "Yes, thank you. I should probably change his bandages." Martha dried her hands. "Go on. I can finish here." Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars emerging like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Ethan walked beside her toward the cabin, his strides measured to match hers. "Jessie says you did well today," he said after a moment. "Says you're a natural on the trails." "She's a good teacher," Mia replied. Ethan nodded. "She is. Tough, but fair." They reached the cabin, where Ranger was waiting on the porch. He stood as they approached, ears alert, but posture relaxed. A good sign, Mia thought. More surprising was his reaction to Ethan. The gentle wag of his tail, no sign of the wariness he typically showed strangers. "Well now," Ethan said, crouching slowly to Ranger's level. "Looks like you're feeling better, partner." He extended his hand, allowing Ranger to sniff before gently examining the bandaged leg. The dog stood perfectly still, trusting in a way that astonished Mia. "He doesn't usually take to people so quickly," she said. Ethan glanced up, a smile touching his eyes, if not his lips. "Like I said, animals know things we don't." He straightened. "The wound's looking good. Another week of rest, and he should be ready for light duty." Mia nodded, opening the cabin door. "Thank you for checking. And for everything else." Ethan remained on the porch, something unspoken hovering between them. Finally, he said, "Whatever you're running from, Mia, it doesn't follow you here unless you let it." The words struck her like a physical blow. She stared at him, caught between denial and desperate relief that someone had named her fear without requiring details. "How did you—" "I recognize the look," he said simply. "Had it myself once." Before she could ask what he meant, he touched the brim of his hat in a small salute. "Good night, Mia. Early start tomorrow. We're moving cattle to the summer pastures." As he walked away, disappearing into the darkness between the cabin and the main house, Mia felt something shift inside her, a small loosening of the tight knot of fear she'd carried for months. Inside, she lit the lamp and settled on the small couch, Ranger's head heavy in her lap. Outside, the vast Colorado night enveloped Clearwater Ranch in star-studded darkness. For the first time since fleeing her old life, Mia slept without dreams. The next week at Clearwater Ranch unfolded in a rhythm that felt increasingly natural to Mia. Each morning began before dawn. Coffee with Martha in the quiet kitchen, then out to the stables where the horses nickered in greeting, their breath creating clouds in the cool mountain air. Frank taught her the cattle operation, while Jessie continued her trail guide training with demanding precision. And through it all, Ethan Mason watched. Not intrusively, but with a steady attention that made Mia feel simultaneously exposed and protected. Ranger improved daily, the deep gash on his leg healing cleanly. By the 5th day, he was putting weight on it, eager to explore beyond the cabin porch. Martha had taken to bringing him treats whenever she visited, and even Jessie had grudgingly admitted he was not the worst dog she'd ever met. "He's got good eyes," Jessie had commented, watching Ranger track a hawk's movement across the sky. Observant, useful trait in a ranch dog. It was Frank, however, who truly won Ranger over. The old cowboy had appeared at the cabin early one morning with a handcrafted leather collar. "Every working dog needs proper gear," he'd said gruffly, presenting it to Mia. "Made it last night. Should fit him good." The collar was beautiful, sturdy but supple, with Ranger's name tooled into the leather alongside a simple design of mountains and trees. Mia had been touched beyond words, while Ranger submitted to having it fitted with dignified patience. "Thank you," she'd managed finally. "It's perfect." Frank had shrugged, embarrassed by her emotion. "Just practical. Can't have him mistaken for a stray if he's guarding the barn." The mention of barn duty had become something of a gentle joke between them all, a reminder of Ethan's original condition for their stay. "How's our future barn guardian today?" Martha would ask. Or Jessie would tease, "Better get strong quick, dog." Those barn mice aren't going to chase themselves. Even Ethan participated, stopping by each evening to check Ranger's progress with gruff comments about security protocols and coyote deterrence that somehow always ended with him sneaking the dog extra scraps from dinner. On Sunday evening, the night before the first tourists were due to arrive, Mia sat on her cabin porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Ranger lay beside her, his new collar gleaming against his dark fur. "We could be happy here," she whispered to him, scratching behind his ears. At least for a while. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Ethan walked toward the cabin, carrying something bulky under his arm. Ranger's tail thumped against the porch boards in greeting. "Traitor," Mia murmured to the dog with a smile. "Bought with beef scraps and ear scratches." "Evening," Ethan said, climbing the steps to join her. "Thought you might need this for tomorrow." He held out what appeared to be a weathered leather jacket. "Gets cold on the morning trails, even in summer." Mia accepted it hesitantly. The jacket was beautiful, soft with age and use, but still sturdy and practical. "Thank you, but I couldn't." "It's just gathering dust," he interrupted. "Better used than stored." She slipped it on, finding it only slightly too large. The leather was warm against the evening chill, carrying a faint scent of pine and horses that seemed perfectly suited to Clearwater Ranch. "It suits you," Ethan said, his voice softer than she'd heard before. Mia felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "Whose was it?" she asked, knowing instinctively it hadn't been his. Ethan's eyes shifted to the distant mountains. "My sister's. Caroline." The way he said the name, gently, with an undercurrent of old pain, told Mia not to press further. Instead, she simply said, "I'll take good care of it." He nodded, seeming grateful for her restraint. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," she admitted. "Jessie says the first group is 16 people from Chicago. Lawyers on a corporate retreat." Ethan's mouth quirked. "City slickers playing cowboy. You'll do fine. Just remember, they want the illusion of adventure, not the real thing." "So Jessie keeps reminding me." Mia smiled. "No stampedes, no rattlesnakes, no bears." "At least not on the first day," he agreed, a rare full smile transforming his features. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky, stars appearing one by one until the heavens were ablaze. Ranger shifted, resting his head on Ethan's boot with surprising familiarity. "He trusts you," Mia observed quietly. Ethan's hand dropped to scratch the dog's ears. Trust is earned, not given. Something people could learn from dogs. The words hung between them, laden with meaning. Mia pulled the jacket tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how much she wanted to trust this man, and how terrified she was to do so. "Ethan," she began hesitantly. "What you said the other night, about recognizing someone who's running." He was silent for a long moment, his face shadowed in the gathering darkness. "Some stories are best saved for another time," he said finally. "But I meant what I said. Whatever you're running from doesn't follow you here unless you let it." Before she could respond, he rose to his feet. "Early start tomorrow. The lawyers arrive at 10, but we'll need to prepare the horses by 7. He paused at the top of the steps. "That jacket has inside pockets. Good for carrying essentials on the trail." With that cryptic comment, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Mia to wonder at the unspoken understanding that seemed to be growing between them. The next morning dawned clear and perfect, as if Clearwater Ranch had ordered ideal weather for their first tourists of the season. Mia arrived at the stables before sunrise, Carolyn's jacket comfortable on her shoulders, as she helped Jesse and Frank prepare the trail horses. "Nervous, Kentucky?" Jesse asked, using the nickname she'd bestowed after learning of Mia's childhood summers. "Not really," Mia replied, surprised to find it was true. "I feel ready." Jesse nodded approvingly. "You are. Just remember, you're in charge out there, not them, no matter how many expensive suits they own in Chicago." The lawyers arrived precisely at 10, men and women in brand-new Western wear that still had price tags attached to some of the hats. They exclaimed over the beauty of the ranch, took countless photos, and approached the horses with a mixture of enthusiasm and trepidation that Mia found endearing rather than annoying. Jesse took half the group on the challenging North Trail, while Mia led the remaining 8 on the gentler East Path, a 3-hour ride with spectacular views and minimal technical difficulty. To her surprise, she enjoyed it immensely, answering questions about the mountains, pointing out wildlife, sharing carefully edited stories about ranch life. Her group returned jubilant and saddle-sore, full of praise for their, quote, authentic Western experience. As Mia helped them dismount and cared for the horses afterward, she caught sight of Ethan watching from the corral fence. When their eyes met, he touched the brim of his hat in a small salute that felt like approval. That evening, as the lawyers enjoyed a catered barbecue on the main house lawn, the ranch staff gathered in the kitchen for their own dinner. The mood was celebratory. The first day had gone smoothly, with no incidents more serious than a dropped camera and one lawyer's discovery that his brand-new boots gave him blisters. "You did good today, Kentucky," Jessie said, raising her coffee mug in a toast. Those city folks couldn't stop talking about how knowledgeable their guide was. "Knew you had it in you," Frank added with a wink. Martha served homemade apple pie with generous scoops of vanilla ice cream, and for a moment, Mia felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: belonging. The feeling was so unexpected, so overwhelming, that she excused herself early, needing space to process the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Outside, the night was alive with stars. Mia walked slowly toward her cabin, Carolyn's jacket wrapped around her against the evening chill. As she passed the small barn where Ranger would eventually stand guard, she noticed a light glowing from within. Curious, she approached quietly. Through the half-open door, she could see Ethan working at a wooden bench, his back to her, as he focused on something she couldn't quite make out. Ranger, who had accompanied her on her walk, pushed past her legs and trotted into the barn with familiar ease. Ethan turned at the sound of Ranger's nails on the wooden floor. "Evening, partner," he greeted the dog, then looked up to find Mia standing uncertainly in the doorway. "Mia, come in if you'd like." She stepped inside, the barn's interior warm and surprisingly cozy. Unlike the main barn with its rows of stalls, this smaller structure seemed to serve as a workshop. Tools hung in neat rows on the walls, while the central space held a large workbench currently covered with leather scraps. "What are you making?" she asked, approaching cautiously. Ethan held up what appeared to be a dog harness. Beautifully crafted leather, with padding on the inside surfaces. Thought Ranger might need something more substantial than a collar if he's going to be working. Mia reached out to touch the fine craftsmanship, her fingers brushing against his momentarily. "You made this?" He nodded, looking almost embarrassed. "Used to do leatherwork with my grandfather. Saddles mostly, but other things too." "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "But Ranger's not fully healed yet." "He will be," Ethan replied with quiet confidence. "Another week, maybe less. He's strong." Ranger seemed to understand he was the topic of conversation, sitting proudly beside the workbench as if modeling for measurements. "You've been spending time with him," Mia observed. It wasn't a question. The easy familiarity between man and dog was obvious. Ethan focused on adjusting a buckle. "Been checking on him during the day while you're out with the trail groups. He gets restless alone." The revelation that Ethan had been visiting Ranger during her absences touched something deep in Mia's heart. "Thank you for that. He's not used to being confined." "No creature is," Ethan said simply. "But sometimes it's necessary while healing." The words felt weighted with meaning beyond Ranger's physical recovery. Mia found herself wondering again about Ethan's comment, recognizing someone who's running because he'd done it himself. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan set aside the harness and met her gaze directly. "Caroline, my sister, the one whose jacket you're wearing, she ran too. From something she shouldn't have had to face alone." The admission hung in the warm barn air. Mia's throat tightened. "What happened to her?" Ethan's eyes darkened with old pain. "She married young, wrong man, but we didn't see it until too late. He paused, jaw tightening. He hurt her, controlled her, isolated her from family." Mia's heart hammered against her ribs, the parallels to her own situation almost too much to bear. "She ran," Ethan continued, his voice roughening. "Came here in the middle of the night 5 years ago, bruised and terrified. I gave her shelter, but I didn't understand what she was really facing. Thought it was just a bad marriage, something that could be fixed with time and distance." His hands stilled on the leather. "I was wrong. He found her, convinced her to talk just once, promised he'd changed." A muscle ticked in Ethan's jaw. She believed him. Went back. 3 months later, she was dead. "Accident," they called it. "Fall down the stairs." Mia couldn't speak. Her throat closed with emotion. Without thinking, she reached out, her hand covering his on the workbench. Ethan looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "When I saw you at the gate that first night with Ranger wounded beside you, looking over your shoulder like you expected someone to be following, I saw Caroline." His voice was barely above a whisper now. "Couldn't turn you away any more than I could have turned her away." The confession stripped away pretenses, leaving them both vulnerable in the lamplight. Mia felt tears burning behind her eyes. "My ex-fiancé," she said, the words emerging as if pulled from some deep place inside her. "David, successful, charming, perfect on paper. By the time I realized who he really was, I was already isolated from friends, family, everything familiar." Ethan's hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining in silent support. "The night I left," she continued, "he'd been drinking. Angrier than usual. Ranger sensed it. Stayed close to me. When David started," she swallowed hard. "When he came at me, Ranger intervened. Got between us." She could still hear the terrible sounds. Ranger's protective growl, David's enraged shout, the sickening impact as her loyal defender was kicked, then slashed with a broken bottle. "I managed to get Ranger into the car. Just started driving. No plan, just away." She looked up, meeting Ethan's steady gaze. 3 weeks, 5 states, always looking over my shoulder. Then Nancy at the diner mentioned Clearwater Ranch needed help. And somehow you ended up here," Ethan finished softly. Ranger moved closer, pressing against Mia's legs as if offering comfort for the painful memories. She stroked his head gratefully. "David has connections," she admitted. "Money, influence. He's been calling it a misunderstanding to anyone who'll listen. Says I'm unstable, that I stole his dog. That, he just wants to help me." Ethan's hand tightened on hers. "Men like that don't stop easily," he said, his voice hardening. "They see people as possessions." "That's why I can't stay anywhere too long," Mia whispered. "He'll keep looking." "And that's why you should stay right here," Ethan countered, surprising her. "Where people know you. Where you have allies." The concept was so foreign to Mia's recent existence that she almost couldn't comprehend it. "I couldn't put you all at risk if he found me here." "Let him try," Ethan said, a quiet steel in his voice that sent a shiver down Mia's spine. "Clearwater is more defensible than you might think." The declaration hung between them. Not quite a promise, not quite a threat, but something powerful nonetheless. For the first time since fleeing her old life, Mia allowed herself to consider the possibility of stopping, of standing her ground, rather than running. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "I've been running so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay." Ethan's eyes, blue as the Colorado sky, held hers steadily. "Then we'll remember together." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Ethan released her hand, turning back to the harness. "When Ranger's ready," he said, his voice deliberately lighter, "we'll test this out, see if he takes to barn guarding." Mia recognized the shift, offering her space, time to process the revelations they'd shared. "He will," she said, echoing her words from that first night at the gate. "He's loyal to his core." "Good trait in any creature," Ethan agreed, his eyes meeting hers again briefly. "Human or canine." As Mia walked back to her cabin that night, Ranger padding faithfully beside her, she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her burden had physically lessened its weight. She paused on her porch, looking back at the small barn where light still glowed from Ethan's workshop. "What do you think, boy?" she asked softly. "Could we really stay?" Ranger looked up at her, then back toward the barn, his posture alert but relaxed. Already at home in a way Mia had forgotten was possible. Inside the cabin, she discovered something tucked into the inside pocket of Caroline's jacket. A small, smooth stone, polished by water and time. Turning it over in her palm, she found a single word etched into its surface. Courage. Whether Ethan had placed it there before giving her the jacket, or Caroline had carried it herself, Mia couldn't know. But as she closed her fingers around it, the stone warming against her skin, she felt something long dormant stirring to life inside her. The will to stop running, to turn and face what pursued her. She fell asleep with the stone clutched in her hand. Ranger, a protective presence at the foot of her bed, and dreamed not of pursuit, but of standing still, rooted like the mountains against any storm. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The lawyer group departed, replaced by a family reunion, then a young couple on their honeymoon who wanted private trail rides. Mia grew more confident with each outing, her knowledge of the trails and surrounding wilderness expanding daily. Ranger's recovery progressed remarkably. By the end of the second week, he was moving with only the slightest hint of stiffness, eager to explore beyond the cabin's immediate surroundings. Ethan began taking him on short walks around the property, gradually building his strength while introducing him to his future responsibilities. "He's a natural," Ethan reported one evening, returning Ranger to the cabin after such an excursion. "Smart, attentive, doesn't miss a thing. Been that way since he was a puppy," Mia said, smiling as Ranger proudly displayed a new bandana Frank had tied around his neck, navy blue with white stars. "I think he has more ranch clothes than I do now." Ethan leaned against the porch railing, comfortable in a way he hadn't been during their earlier interactions. "Martha mentioned you might need some proper riding clothes. Jesse's loaners are fine for now, but I should have my own," Mia finished, acknowledging the implication that she might be staying long enough to warrant the investment. "You're right. Next time I go into town, I'll look." A small smile touched Ethan's lips. "Already taken care of. Martha ordered some things from the Western store in town. Should be delivered tomorrow." Mia stared at him, caught between gratitude and an instinctive wariness about accepting such generosity. "Ethan, I can't let you—" "Consider it a uniform," he interrupted gently. "Like any job. Besides, it wasn't just me. Martha, Frank, and Jesse all contributed. The revelation that the entire ranch staff had essentially welcomed her as one of their own brought unexpected tears to Mia's eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting Ethan to misinterpret her emotion. "Thank you," she said simply. "To all of you." Ethan nodded, accepting her gratitude without making her elaborate. After a moment he said, "I think Ranger's ready to try the barn tomorrow night, if you're comfortable with it." The original condition of their stay if he guards the barn, had evolved from a practical arrangement to something symbolic between them. Mia looked at Ranger, who was watching Ethan with what could only be described as eager anticipation. "I think he'd be disappointed if we didn't let him try," she agreed. "He's been watching that barn like it's his personal mission." "Good," Ethan said, pushing off from the railing. "Tomorrow night, then. After dinner." As he walked away, Mia called after him, "The coyotes had better watch out." He glanced back, a rare, full smile transforming his features. "It's not the coyotes I'm worried about." The cryptic comment lingered in Mia's mind as she prepared for bed that night. What exactly was Ethan expecting Ranger to guard against? Ordinary ranch predators or something? Someone else? The next day brought a group of experienced riders from Texas, challenging Mia to lead them on one of the more technical trails. She returned, exhilarated but exhausted, muscles aching pleasantly from the demanding ride. As promised, a package awaited her at the cabin. Several sets of proper riding clothes, a new pair of boots that fit perfectly, and a wide-brimmed hat that Martha assured her would keep the mountain sun from turning you into a lobster. "How did you know my size?" Mia asked, genuinely puzzled. Martha's eyes twinkled. "Been doing laundry for ranch hands for 30 years, dear. I can eyeball a size from across the yard." That evening, dressed in her new clothes, jeans that moved with her instead of restricting, a chambray shirt with pearl snaps, and boots that already felt like old friends, Mia joined the others for dinner. She felt different somehow, as if the outward transformation reflected something deeper, taking root inside her. Ethan's appreciative glance as she entered the kitchen didn't escape her notice, nor did the approving nods from Frank and Jesse. "Looking like a proper rancher now, Kentucky," Jesse commented, passing her a basket of fresh rolls. "Clothes don't make the rancher," Frank countered, "but they sure don't hurt. You'll appreciate those boots on tomorrow's cattle check." Dinner was lively, with plans for the upcoming weekend's guests and discussions about which pastures needed rotation. For the first time, Mia contributed freely to the conversation, offering observations about trail conditions and suggesting a modification to one route that had proven challenging for less experienced riders. "Good thinking," Ethan approved. "We'll make the change tomorrow." After dinner, as Martha served coffee and her famous apple crumble, Ethan glanced at Mia. "Ready for Ranger's first night on duty?" She nodded, a mixture of pride and nervousness fluttering in her stomach. "He's been practicing his fierce face all day." They walked together to the cabin, where Ranger waited eagerly, somehow sensing that tonight was special. Ethan carried the finished harness, a beautiful piece of craftsmanship that fit Ranger perfectly, with Clearwater Ranch tooled into the leather sides. "It's gorgeous," Mia said, watching Ethan adjust the straps with gentle hands. "He looks like he was born to wear it." "Maybe he was," Ethan replied, straightening to admire his handiwork. "Some creatures find their purpose in unexpected places." Together, they walked Ranger to the small barn, explaining his duties as if he could understand every word. Inside, Ethan showed him a comfortable bed prepared in the corner. Old blankets arranged in a nest beside a water bowl and a few carefully selected toys. "Home away from home," Ethan explained. "He'll have shelter, comfort, but still be able to patrol." Mia knelt beside Ranger, suddenly emotional about leaving him alone for the night. "You're sure he's ready?" "His leg is nearly healed," Ethan finished gently. "And he's been champing at the bit for more freedom. This gives him purpose, which is the best medicine for any recovering spirit." The words resonated beyond Ranger's situation, touching something in Mia that recognized the truth in them. Purpose, belonging, trust. These were the medicines her own wounded spirit craved. "Okay," she agreed, giving Ranger a final ear scratch. "Guard well, brave boy. We'll see you in the morning." As they left the barn, Ethan didn't immediately turn toward the main house. Instead, he walked with Mia back to her cabin, their steps matched in comfortable rhythm. "He'll be fine," Ethan assured her, sensing her lingering concern. "Frank will check on him before turning in, and I'll look in during my night rounds." "Night rounds?" Mia asked, surprised. Ethan nodded. "Ranch this size, someone's always doing a final check before midnight. Usually it's me." They reached her cabin, the porch light casting a warm glow in the gathering darkness. Mia paused at the bottom step, suddenly reluctant to end their conversation. "Thank you," she said, "for everything you've done for Ranger." "For me." Ethan's eyes, shadowed under his hat brim, studied her face. "You've earned your place here, Mia. Both of you have." The simple declaration wrapped around her heart like a protective embrace. Before she could respond, the ranch phone rang from the main house, an old-fashioned bell that carried clearly through the evening air. "Better get that," Ethan said, though he didn't immediately move. "Probably the weekend guests confirming details." Mia nodded, still caught in the moment between them. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Mia," he replied softly. Then, with obvious reluctance, he turned toward the main house, his long strides eating up the distance quickly. Alone on her porch, Mia found herself touching the stone in her pocket. Courage, as if drawing strength from its smooth surface. The cabin felt strangely empty without Ranger's presence. But there was comfort in knowing he was fulfilling a purpose, becoming as much a part of Clearwater as she was beginning to feel herself. She sat in the porch swing, watching stars emerge above the mountains, feeling more at peace than she had in months. Whatever came next, whether David eventually found her or not, she was no longer alone in facing it. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. From the direction of the small barn came a single, confident bark Ranger, announcing his presence to the night creatures of Clearwater Ranch. Mia smiled, recognizing the sound not of fear or warning, but of belonging. "Guard well," she whispered into the night. "We're home now." The morning brought gentle rain to Clearwater Ranch, silvery curtains drifting across the mountains and softening the landscape into watercolor. Mia woke to the rhythmic pattering on her cabin roof, momentarily disoriented by Ranger's absence before remembering his new duties. Despite the urge to immediately check on him, she forced herself to follow her normal routine, coffee first, then a quick shower in the tiny bathroom before donning her new ranch clothes. Outside, the world smelled of wet pine and damp earth, the rain lightening to a fine mist that beaded on her hat brim. She walked briskly toward the small barn, anxiety fluttering in her chest despite Ethan's assurances. The barn door was already open. Inside, she found Frank kneeling beside Ranger, who was enthusiastically devouring breakfast from a metal bowl. "Morning, Kentucky," Frank greeted her without looking up. "Your boy here had himself quite a night." Relief flooded through Mia as she took in Ranger's alert posture and bright eyes. "Good morning. He did okay?" Frank straightened with a grunt, knees cracking. "Okay. This fella's a natural guardian. Kept the raccoons from the feed, warned off something bigger around midnight. Coyote, probably, and still had energy for a proper greeting when I brought his breakfast." Ranger finished his meal and trotted to Mia, pressing against her legs with obvious delight at her arrival, but no desperate clinginess. He seemed proud, she realized, fulfilled. "Ethan was right," she said, scratching Ranger's ears affectionately. "He needed purpose." "Don't we all?" Frank replied philosophically. "Speaking of, Jesse's looking for you. Got a special request from those Texas riders. Want to try the High Ridge Trail today. Usually Ethan leads that one, but he's tied up with the cattle auction preparations. Mia's eyes widened. The high ridge? Jesse said that's the most challenging trail on the property. Frank nodded, his weathered face creasing in a smile. That it is. Which is why Jesse thinks you're ready for it. The vote of confidence warmed Mia more than she expected. I won't let her down. Course you won't, Frank said matter-of-factly. Now, best let your guardian here show you what he learned last night before you head out. For the next 15 minutes, Ranger proudly demonstrated his new skills, patrolling the barn perimeter, alerting to Frank's deliberate rustling in the feed bins, and standing attentively at what was clearly his favorite observation post by the barn door. He's a quick study, Frank commented. Ethan spent some time with him late last night, showing him the ropes. Says he's never seen a dog pick things up so fast. Mia felt a pang at the image of Ethan and Ranger working together while she slept, forming a bond that seemed to deepen daily. Thank you for checking on him this morning. Frank waved away her gratitude. Part of ranch life. We look after our own. Our own. The simple phrase followed Mia as she reluctantly left Ranger to his duties and headed toward the stables where Jesse waited. 2 weeks ago, she had been a stranger here, desperate and afraid. Now she was our own. Part of something larger than herself, wrapped in a protection that went beyond physical safety. The High Ridge Trail proved as challenging as advertised, a narrow path that wound up the steepest part of the mountain, offering breathtaking views but requiring constant vigilance from both riders and horses. Mia led her group of experienced Texans with a confidence that surprised even herself, sharing her knowledge of the terrain while ensuring everyone's safety. By the time they returned to the ranch in mid-afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming. The Texans were exhilarated, full of praise for their guide, and already planning a longer excursion for the following day. Well done, Jesse said simply as they unsaddled the horses together. Coming from Jesse, the understated approval felt like a standing ovation. Thanks for trusting me with it, Mia replied, running a curry comb over Rusty's damp coat. Jessie was quiet for a moment, focused on checking her horse's hooves. Finally, she said, "Trust is earned. You've earned it." Before Mia could respond to this unprecedented warmth, Jessie straightened and nodded toward the main house. "Ethan wants to see you when you're finished here. Something about town tomorrow." Curious, Mia completed her tasks with meticulous care before heading to find Ethan. She stopped first at the small barn to check on Ranger, finding him contentedly gnawing on a bone under Frank's supervision. "Don't worry about him," Frank assured her. "He's living his best life. Go see what the boss wants." She found Ethan in the ranch office, a small room off the main house kitchen that somehow contained the organizational heart of Clearwater. Maps covered one wall, while another held a complex calendar marked with guest bookings, cattle movements, and maintenance schedules. He looked up from his desk as she appeared in the doorway, his expression warming. "Jesse said you handled the High Ridge like you were born to it." Mia felt herself flush with pleasure at the praise. "It was amazing. The view from the top. I've never seen anything like it." "Not many have," he agreed. "It's a special place." He set aside the papers he'd been reviewing. "I need to go into Denver tomorrow for the auction preparations. Thought you might want to come along. Pick up anything you need. See something besides mountains for a day." The invitation caught her off guard. Denver was a 2-hour drive, significant one-on-one time with Ethan away from the ranch. "What about the trail rides tomorrow? Jesse can handle the morning group. Frank will take the afternoon beginners." His eyes held her steadily. "Unless you'd rather not go." "No, I'd like to," she said quickly, perhaps too quickly based on the small smile that touched his lips. "It's just... Denver is a big city." Ethan nodded, understanding her unspoken concern. "Not likely he'd be looking there, especially not for someone he thinks is still running. Besides," he added with quiet confidence, "you wouldn't be alone." Ranger's ears perked up at the word barn, his posture straightening as if to prove his readiness for the responsibility. "I'd say that's a yes," Martha observed dryly. "Dinner's nearly ready. Frank and Jesse are already inside. You two wash up and join us when you're ready." As Martha headed back to the house, Mia found herself alone with Ethan in the golden evening light, Ranger a warm presence beside them. Something had changed between them during the day. Barriers lowered, Possibilities acknowledged. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "All of it." Ethan's eyes, warm in the sunset glow, held hers. "Thank you for coming back." The double meaning wasn't lost on her. Thank you for returning to the ranch, but also for returning to life instead of just running from it. Before she could respond, Ranger nudged impatiently at their legs, breaking the moment with canine practicality. They laughed together, the tension dissolving into something sweeter, full of promise rather than urgency. As they walked toward the house, Ethan's hand found hers briefly, a touch so light it might have been imagined. But Mia knew it wasn't imagination. It was real, like the stone in her pocket, like the mountains around them, like the dog trotting proudly beside them. Real, and worth every risk it might entail. Inside, surrounded by the warmth of the kitchen and the people who had become her unlikely family, Mia felt something settle in her soul. A certainty that, whatever came next, she would face it standing still, rooted in this place where she had found not just shelter, but strength. Later, as she walked Ranger to his barn post under a sky blazing with stars, Mia whispered to him, "We're staying, boy, for as long as they'll have us." Ranger looked up at her, his wise eyes reflecting starlight, tail sweeping the ground in what could only be approval. Then he turned to the barn door, assuming his guard position with dignified purpose. Mia watched him for a moment, this loyal defender who had saved her in more ways than one. Then she turned toward her cabin, where a light glowed in the window, left on to welcome her home. Behind her, Ranger's confident bark sounded once, echoing across Clearwater Ranch. Not a warning, but a promise. They were home, they were safe, and they were finally, after so long, standing still. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.